Good morning, little Miss Deltanelle. Hope we are having a good day. It's warm, it's sunny, but it's not warm up here. We've had some really cold weeks, and it looks like we're going to have a really dry January when it gets logged in the books. But on the good side, it makes it for some clear nights, and you can see all the planets. We have 5 planets that you could have seen. We're now definitely seeing 4 in the sky. So that's pretty cool. So you might have to go and see if one of the bigs will take you out and point out the planets up above your head down there. Okay, so we are going to read a book. I thought it was a board book when I bought it. It wasn't, and it deals with trains. I thought it'd be perfect since you kind of still are enjoying those choo-choo trains. And it's called Niccolini's Song. It's by Chuck Wilcoxen and illustrated by Mark Buehner. Mark Buehner. And this is a train yard. And that's like the big barn we went to the train museum down in Oregon. Where they store trains. And so we're going to read about Niccolini's Song. Okay, so let me get my right? So the Goyers, well, we're still going to have a Goyer, I think. We'll go like that. A long time ago, before there were space shuttles, superhighways, or jumbo jets, there were trains. The great engines would rest in night in the rail yards, protected in the dark by watchmen. Niccolini was a watchman. And there you can see Niccolini going out and looking at the big train right there. Right? I'm trying to make sure I cut the glare. Now, some watchmen were as cold and hard and strong as the engines they cared for. Niccolini was not. He was a quiet man. His wife always said he was a good listener. There's Niccolini with his lantern. Every night, dark or starry, Niccolini would wander around the rail yard, lantern in hand, listening for trouble. He hoped he wouldn't find any. One night, Niccolini thought he heard footsteps. Well, he knew he heard footsteps, but he tried to convince himself that he hadn't. Like all rail yard watchmen, Niccolini had been trained in the proper use of a Hempstead harmonic alarm whistle, and he blew it. There we go. And dizzy from blowing, he stopped and listened as the footstep raced off through the gravel, followed by panicky rattles and clanks at the fence. On the weakest of knees, Niccolini climbed between 2 cars and aimed his lantern at the dark figures wobbling at the top of the fence. So there he goes. He's after them. Right? Never had raccoons look so embarrassed or a watchman so relieved. It's a family of raccoons. And Niccolini sat down next to a steam engine to collect himself. He was still just a little upset. The night was once again quiet, and Niccolini closed his eyes. A deep voice nearby whispered, "Are they gone?" Niccolini kept his eyes closed and slowly reached for his whistle. No, please, no more whistling." The voice was very polite. Now Niccolini opened one eye and peered to his left. He opened the other eye and peered to his right. He was certain that he was alone. "I've got a big day tomorrow, and I'm afraid I might never get back to sleep," the voice said. And Niccolini turned to the steam engine and tilted his head. There we go, right? Like that. Now, just about anybody can hear a steam engine as it thunders down the track, but it takes a very good listener to hear a steam engine worry. 77 boxcars from here to Wixahachie, and only 3 hours sleep, it said. Oh, that can't be good. And Niccolini blinked. "Would you sing to me?" the locomotive asked. "Something slow and sweet?" And Niccolini slowly turned all the way around to be absolutely sure no one was playing a trick on him. He took a step closer to the engine. He placed his hand on the cool steel and began to hum a tune his mother used to sing to him when he was a little boy. He could remember only some of the words, so he began to sing. He made up a new song for the locomotive. It was a song about gentle hills, steady tailwinds, and feathers for freight. And soon Niccolini knew the anxious engine was asleep. The next night, Niccolini had to sing another engine to sleep, and then another, and each with its own song. Now, Niccolini knew that some of the trains were perfectly capable of falling asleep without a lullaby. In fact, there were nights when certain engines who felt unloved would wake themselves up just to have Niccolini sing them back to sleep. Niccolini didn't mind, the words came to him easily, and the tune was always the same, and it cost him nothing to bring them comfort. There you go, right? Pretty cool engines there. Kind of like the one we saw down in Portland, right? Both of those. Very cool. And one hot night, Niccolini sat at the edge of the yard between a frustrated brake car and the wooden fence. He sang softly for smooth stops and cooperative cabooses. On the other side of the fence, a path had been worn through the weeds by a mother who, on restless nights, would walk from the city with her baby. She would walk and walk, swaying and praying that the baby would fall asleep in her strong, soft arms. As Niccolini sang to the brake car, he heard footsteps coming down the path. It was the mother with her baby, and this night Niccolini was close enough to the fence for them to be caught and held by this soothing voice. The brake car snored gently on its siding. Niccolini sang the softest, sweetest song about the cool sheets and leafy breezes, and the baby fell asleep, and the mother whispered 1,000 thanks and tiptoed back to the city. There we go, and there's Niccolini, you can see there, right? Night after night, she would return with her baby. Niccolini would sing to them, and she would whisper her thanks over the fence. The mother told her friends and about the rail yard lullabies, and soon there was a line of crying babies and exhausted mothers waiting at the fence for Niccolini. The train scene seemed to mind, and then came the big night. All right, pretty cool, huh? The big night. It was only wind, but it was a wind that whistled in chimneys and shook last year's kites out of the trees. Windows rattled and shutters clattered and nobody could get to sleep. And finally the wind quieted down, but the children in the city didn't. Babies wailed, older children tossed and turned, and parents sat on their rumpled beds staring up at the ceiling. Then, starting with the most desperate mothers, someone in each building remembered Niccolini. And before too long, the rail yard was completely surrounded by crying babies, temper-troubled children, exasperated parents, several disconcerted dogs with no other hope than Niccolini. The noise was deafening, and the confusion overwhelming. And Niccolini stood on a box in the middle of the yard and sang a beautiful lullaby about calm water, warm sand, deep shadows, and gently swaying hammocks. And you can see, there we go, right? There's Niccolini out here, and everybody surrounding him, including a little pouty baby. You see the pouty baby? Nobody heard a word. The crowd was too big and murmurous. Niccolini listened. Oh, this isn't going well. He walked over to a steam engine, and it spoke to him softly, and Niccolini smiled and nodded. He walked over to his box, climbed up, and raised his hands over his head. He pointed to the largest locomotive, and it began to blow its whistle, soft and low, as if it were miles away. He pointed to a smaller engine, and it began to blow. He pointed to another, and soon they were all blowing softly. Then Niccolini began to move his hands gracefully. The whistles began to play a tune, the same tune Niccolini remembered from his childhood, the same tune the trains had heard and loved. And what I think is interesting here, Delta Now, do you see what's over here? We have a dinosaur in the clouds, right? So we saw dinosaurs and trains that day, didn't we? The crowds grew quiet, the dogs curled up and closed their red-rimmed eyes with heavy sighs, and the children became calm, and babies fell asleep. And one by one, parents began to back away from the fence, stroking the damp hair of their sleeping children as they quietly carried them up the dirt path and back to the city. And one by one, Niccolini thanked each of the locomotives. One by one, they said, "You are welcome." Niccolini picked up his lantern and listened, and all he could hear was crickets and yawns. Then all the trains whispered together in the dark and tender night. What do you think they're going to say? Oh, and look here in the cloud. It's a sleeping baby. Bunch of sleeping babies in the clouds. Do you see them? Train said, "Good night, Niccolini. Good night." And this is for Gramps, who sang of Niccolini, for Mom, who always clapped, and for two little boys who always loved to hear a story, and to Kara. So there is Niccolini's song. That is just a cute book. Chuck Wilcoxen and Mark Buehner. Buehner. So there we go. Okay, Little Miss, a little bit longer book there again, but hopefully that was fun to listen to. Have a great day, and let's do it. We got knucks up high, we got a high five, we got a low five, we got a twist, and we got a twirl, we got loves to you, Little Miss, to the bigs that are right there. with you. And then anybody else that's watching, hopefully you enjoyed the story. Lots of love. Take care.